Hi, and thank you for watching the forum. I'm your host, Ashley Tate, here with my co-host, Christy Largent. And today we're going to be learning about some wildlife because we are here with Dan Frisk, and he's the manager of the Sacramento Wildlife Refuge Complex.
That's correct.
Okay, that was another mouthful. And so it's really interesting to have you here because I think many of us don't even realize how close you are to, to Redding and the North State in general, that we have this National Wildlife Refuge. So tell us a little bit about what that is.
And where are you?
Yeah.
Sure. There's 5 National Wildlife Refuges which we administer out of our Willows office. So we're just south of Willows, about 7 miles, right on 99, just parallel 5. But we were established in 1937, so to really protect and restore wetlands within the Central Valley, in particular, working in the Sacramento Valley.
Now, was there anything happening during that time that?
Right.
Why they needed protection?
Absolutely. If you look back in the early 30s and around 1937, you look at what was happening in California, what was happening across the country, the Dust Bowl was occurring back in the Midwest, and a lot of wetlands were depleted. And there was a drought going back then as well, and a lot of these wetlands were destroyed, and this was where we realized how important they were in starting to restore these wetlands to provide the habitat for these wintering migratory birds that use, in the case of California, Pacific flyway.
Yeah.
Wow. From where to where?
Well, some of the snow geese that we get come from an island in Russia, and they come from Russia, Alaska, all the way into Canada, and then they come down what we call, it's an avian highway. It's called Pacific Highway, Pacific Flyway, and it goes from Alaska literally all the way down to Mexico.
That is really interesting.
And then about 6% of the wintering birds in that flyway winter here in the Central Valley of California.
So what exactly does that mean when you say they winter here? What does that mean?
Well, as we know up north, during the winter months, things freeze up. The food resources aren't available for the birds, so they migrate. They migrate south, and what they're doing is they're coming down here where there's open water and food available for the birds. They recharge, if you will, get plenty of food down here, and then they move back up in the summer months up there where there's more insects, water available, and then that's really their breeding ground. So it's an annual event every year. Spring and fall, they move back and forth along the Pacific Flyway.
Wow.
So there's 5 wildlife refuges that you oversee.
That's correct.
And it's all part of this Sacramento Wildlife Complex.
Correct.
Right? So how many birds do you think are affected by this, and how does that work?
Sure. We have, during our peak times in the winter, we could have anywhere from 2 to 3 million birds within in the Central Valley, and a good portion of those will be in the Sacramento Valley. So it's a lot of birds. And that, we're really just talking about migratory waterfowl, but we also have a lot of other wildlife, wetland-dependent birds, like shorebirds that use these areas. Also wading birds, if you're familiar with the egrets, the great egrets, the great blue herons, white-faced ibis, they all really need those areas in that water to kind of recharge and get food, to get ready for the breeding season the following year. So.
Yeah. So it sounds like if you're at all into bird watching.
Oh yeah.
And like you were saying earlier about being on the highway.
Yeah, on I-5 you see that.
Sure.
Yeah, and all of us have kind of seen that, right? So when you talk about bird watching, can you come down there?
Absolutely. We have 2 auto tours on 2 of the refuges. Our Sacramento National Wildlife Refuge, which is just south of Willows. There's a 6.5 mile auto tour, and we have observation platforms, and the birds are right there for viewing.
Wow. So you drive through.
You can drive through, right?
Okay.
And then also on our Calusa Refuge, which is just out of Calusa. If you take Highway 20 out of Williams back towards Calusa, we have another refuge called the Calusa Refuge. Has a 3-mile auto tour, observation platforms as well. So, wildlife observation, wildlife viewing is a big part of what we're about. out. We also have photo blinds. Wildlife photography has really become a new hobby for folks, and what a great resource. We have some really great photo blinds as well. And then the other wildlife dependent, we call it public use or wildlife dependent recreation is, and we also have hunting. We do have hunting on the refuge as well. So, we basically have great wildlife viewing. We have great photography, also hunting, and then we have some great educational programs that get kids involved with nature as well.
Yeah, I thought your kids' programs were pretty cool. So tell us a little bit about that, and then I want to go back to the hunting because I want to find out a little bit.
Sure.
About
well, I always look. It's all about the kids. We have a great resource here. It's a public resource, and we work real closely with the public schools to get kids out, teach them about wetlands, teach them about wildlife, and the importance of this as a public resource. So we during our peak months when we have the waterfall there, surely we have school groups out, but it's a great place when schools are looking for field trips to bring the kids out, and we cater with activities from looking at wetlands to teaching about birds to plants, monarch butterflies, whatever the case may be. So we have a great program. Right now we have a program going on. It's called Junior Duck Stamp Program, where we get kids doing actually artwork and then learning about wetlands.
At RSA, the kids enter the duck stamp contest every year.
Yes.
Yeah,
and we minister that out of Willows there.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Pretty awesome.
Well, that would have been a neat tie-in for a field trip.
Absolutely.
Because the 4th and 5th graders and junior high are designing the duck stamps, and
oh, absolutely.
It's a pretty big deal.
It's a big deal. I mean, they compete statewide, but then the winner will compete nationally, and then actually a stamp will be made.
Yeah, I actually have been to the museum in D.C. where you can see all the winning duck stamp artwork.
Right.
It's pretty spectacular.
It is.
Now you also will go to the schools, right? So if a school doesn't
we do.
come
Yes,
down to you,
yes,
you'll come
we do. And then we have programs where we actually try to give some financial support, because I know sometimes schools can't get the buses, but we try to work with the schools. But you can either have it on site or we'll go to the school as well.
That's amazing. Okay. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, what are some of the rare birds that you've come across?
Well, we have a lot of different birds. Because of the habitat, we've lost 95% of the natural wetlands in California and over 98% of the riparian habitat in the state.
Okay, say that again.
Yeah,
those are some big numbers.
Yeah, well, 95% of the natural wetlands in the Central Valley have been either destroyed or modified or converted. And then also 98% of riparian habitat, which is really that habitat that's along, like in particular here, the Sacramento River. So there's a lot of birds that rely on that unique habitat, water birds. So for instance, on the riparian areas, we got the yellow-billed cuckoo, which is a rare bird. It'll be listed as an endangered bird here. They're looking at it right now because, again, the habitat. We had a relatively rare bird, the American bald eagle, which has been delisted. We do have a nest on the refuge, and again, it's a very great habitat for bald eagles as well. So it's really the habitat. We try to maintain the habitat, and then hopefully these birds won't be as rare. They'll become more common. We had one bird called the Falcata duck, which actually came from Asia. It was not unique to North America, and when that bird showed up, you talk about the birding folks. We had people from Maine, from Florida, calling in to want to see this rare bird. Wow. And the bird was still at our Calusa refuge as of last year. So there's a lot of unique, and again, they're drawn here by the wetland habitat that's brought in, and then they come in with the birds that are coming from north, from either Canada or Alaska.
So are you set up like a nonprofit where people can come help, or is it something that the government?
Well, we're a government agency.
Okay.
We're U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We're part of the Department of Interior, so we are federal. But we do have we have volunteers that help on the refuge, and also nonprofits. We presently have a nonprofit association we work with. It's Alta Cal Audubon out of Chico, which helps us run a bookstore that we have. We can provide wildlife books and things for the public when they come visit. But No, we work real closely with nonprofits. We have a really strong partnership, and for us to really do the things that we do in the Central Valley, there's a lot of partners that, nonprofits like, Ducks Unlimited, Cal Waterfowl, Audubon, California, TNC, Point Blue, just a variety. So when we're working with these wetlands and this unique and rich wildlife resource, we can't do it alone. We have to work with partners, and we do that.
How do people, if they wanted to come work down there and volunteer with you, how would they go about that?
Yeah, all they got to do is contact us. We have a very active volunteer program. You can just contact the refuge and just let them know that you have interest. What we like to do is, one, we surely have needs. We can't do it all, so there's certain things that we can use volunteers to help, but we like to pair volunteers up with what they like. They enjoy it. So when they get there, you'll find there's a variety of things, from working with youth, with the educational programs, working with the habitat, going out and helping mowing. We have a lot of our infrastructure, so our platforms, for viewing platforms, people can come out, and if they have carpentry skills, they can help there. So really, there's a variety of things, and it's a fun place to work, and we consider our volunteers, like I think a lot of different organizations, as part of our family of folks there at the refuge.
So the best way to get more information on what you have going on down there is how?
All right, well, our website, go to our website, and it's www.fws.gov/refuge/Sacramento.
Yeah, you can get that on the bottom of the screen.
So go there, and then our phone number at the refuge headquarters is 530-934-2801, and we have staff there to answer. Volunteers that may be answering the phone, and they'll get
You'll speak to someone directly.
Yep, you right, and we take pride, and you're not going to get an answer machine. And generally, you're going to get a voice.
Good. Yeah, my guess is if they Googled Sacramento Wildlife Refuge,
that would work just as well. That would just as well.
Just Google Sacramento Wildlife Refuge.
Google it. We have a Facebook. Surely get on and you can friend the refuges. We update a lot of the activities that are occurring throughout the year.
Dan, thank you so much for coming on. This was really
well. Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Right.
So we're going to be right back in just a few minutes with the second half of our show, which I think you'll like too.
And we're back with Amy Collier, the Park Ranger and Management Assistant of and I am going to read this because it is long, the Tule Lake Unit of the World War II Valor in the Pacific National Monument, which is located in Hawaii. Is that correct?
There are 9 sites of the monument. Most of them are in Hawaii and Alaska.
Okay.
The Tule Lake Unit is the only one that's in California and the only one in the continental United States.
Wow. We are going to learn some stuff today.
Tell us all about it.
Yeah.
What are you? I think you're a hidden resource.
Yes.
Everybody knows about the Lava Beds National Monument. Most people know about that.
Yeah.
But did you know that up there's something else? And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
So fill us in. What have you got going on up there?
Sure. So the Tule Lake Unit is a national monument that was established in 2008. So it's pretty new. Because of its location, it's currently co-managed by Lava Beds National Monument. But what it does is it marks the site of the Japanese American incarceration site from World War II. And tells the story of the incarceration, segregation of Japanese American citizens during that time.
Which is really kind of a huge deal, because I don't think anybody knew that it was that close to us. I think we thought the closest one was
down in the desert.
Washington?
Yeah, there's
down
one
in
in
the desert.
Manzanar, the other one in California.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's interesting. There were 10 relocation centers during World War II. Most of them were out west. There were 2 in Arkansas further east, but 2 in California. Of all 10, Tule Lake is the largest at almost 20,000 people at its peak. It is also the only one that became a higher security segregation center. So it also has a little interesting story regarding the infamous loyalty questionnaire that came out.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the history of the Japanese internment camps, and also what Tule Lake also had the Germans and Italians as well.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about all of that, just so we can get.
Yeah, so after Pearl Harbor in February 1942, President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066, which said that any person who the military believed was compromising the war effort could be removed from their homes and incarcerated. About a month later, the first military exclusion zones went up along the West Coast, and the incarceration of Japanese Americans began. Anyone with as little as 1/16 Japanese ancestry living along the West Coast of the United States would have been given notice that they had to leave their homes, sometime with as little as 2 days' notice, pack up what they could, bring with what they could carry, and move out of their homes, first to assembly centers, and then to one of these 10 relocation centers.
One of the interesting things about that is that most of these people were U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't
in
like,
America. Yeah.
born here,
Yeah.
you know, had
Americans.
citizenship, Japanese Americans, and then, so I never really understood why the president did that, and I won't ask you to answer that today. But it is very interesting and disheartening when you hear that most of them were, you know, American citizens.
Yeah.
So tell us about the Germans and the Italians that also came, that were there too as well.
Yeah, so the Japanese Americans would have been incarcerated at the Tule Lake Segregation Center, which is located in the current town of Newell. So just southeast of Tule Lake. Camp Tule Lake was a former CCC camp. That's about 10-15 miles west of Newell, 5 miles west of the town of Tule Lake. And during the war, it held a couple different groups of Japanese Americans. It was a much smaller site, but it also held about a couple hundred Italian POWs and about 800 German POWs. And that's a really interesting story as well. I mean, it's only 10-15 miles away, but the treatment of the POWs, people who were captured fighting against the United States, mostly in Northern Africa and Europe, was much, much better than the treatment of the American citizens just east of there. So they were able to go outside of the camp, work on the local farms, which is why they were brought in to help local farmers during this shortage, because so many of the young men were overseas fighting. Japanese Americans at the segregation centers couldn't leave the surrounding area. They were paid much, much less
But the
than
POWs
the
could.
POWs. Right. So it's an interesting kind of contrast, and both sites are part of the Tule Lake unit. So when you visit the Tule Lake unit, we take you to both the segregation center and then also Camp Tule Lake as well.
Oh, really? You drive people out there to the one about, you said about 15 miles away?
Yeah. So our visitor contact station is located kind of in between at the Tule Lake Butte Valley Fairgrounds. We staff that from Memorial Day through Labor Day, every day of the week. And then also on Saturdays in the summer, we have regularly scheduled afternoon tours. And so we'll take you to the segregation center down in Newell, and we'll be able to go inside a building there, the infamous Tule Lake Jail building, which is still standing, and has some interesting historic graffiti from people who were incarcerated in that building still on the walls.
Oh my gosh.
So that's incredibly powerful to see. We'll stop there, and then we also go back over to Camp Tule Lake and go inside a barrack building there that's been a little bit restored. And so you can get a kind of idea of the CCC history, then the Japanese American history, and also the POW history.
So the CCC must have been part of Roosevelt's, like the recovery, the New Deal stuff, right?
Yes, yeah.
But how many of those original camp buildings and so forth still remain?
So at Camp Tule Lake, there are only about 5 buildings that still stand. There's only one that we bring the public into because it's been restored. There are a couple other buildings in various levels of decay and in need of restoration. But we are able to take people into one of the barrack buildings. That land was managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service after the war, and so some of those buildings were repurposed.
And
still
even prior
maintained.
to the war, they used to manage it, and then the government sounded like took it away, used it for this, and then gave it back.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Of all 10 of the relocation centers, they were picked for a number of reasons. One of them being most of them were on land that the government already owned, because it was a very quick transition. The Tule Lake unit opened in May 1942. By August 1942, it had 15,000 people already living there.
Oh my gosh.
So they needed to build these barracks very, very quickly. And so that's one of the reasons why having land that the government already owned was an easy transition. They were also all in very remote locations away from large population centers, or surrounded by agricultural lands that could support this large influx of people. And then also near rail lines and roads that could move people and goods in and out pretty easily.
Gosh, it's like
Hard to imagine, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it is.
Yeah. So do you have have you had visitors come back that had actually been incarcerated there or held there?
Yeah, and it's we've had people who were incarcerated there. Many of them are a little bit older now, but were there as children, and so they have a very different perspective of the incarceration experience than maybe their parents had, because their parents shielded them a little bit from the reasons why they were incarcerated. And so they saw it as going to this large new camp full of other children. More than half of the people incarcerated there were children.
Oh, wow.
And all these other children to play with. Parents couldn't really exercise their authority over them because they were able to run free throughout this camp. So they have a different perspective, and it wasn't till later when they heard these stories from their parents, read these stories from other people, that they realized how significant this was and how influential it was on their own parents. So we have people come back from that, and then also children of people who were incarcerated coming back as well.
And this camp was only open for 4 years, right? Which is kind of interesting because all these things happened, and I mean the mistreatment and all. I didn't go too deep into like some of the things that actually happened, but some of the mistreatment and the government doing this so quickly and only for such a short period of time. I mean, and now you guys have had this there since 1946, right?
Right. Yep.
And so, are you planning to go back through and restore all of it so that they can all be used and seen? And because you guys have only opened since 2012.
We were established in 2008. Only have had funding really since 2012.
Okay.
We are currently in the process of developing our general management plan for the site. That is the 20-year long-term plan. And what that will outline is what we do with the buildings, what kind of restoration we do, what kind of visitor center we put in. But one of our projects we are working on right now is the restoration of that jail building. So that is something we are focusing on. We only have a small portion of the whole segregation center area. Most of that is in the administrative area, but it includes that jail building of the camp. And so we're talking about, we have about 7 buildings in that site that we could use as visitor centers or other contact stations. And that's what our general management plan will tell us. We had a series of public meetings over the last few years to gather that input from the public and what they would like to see, and in the process of writing that plan now.
I'm kind of curious, how did the monument from Hawaii end up with a portion of it in remote Northern California? How did that come about?
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of story. We're happy we were established in 2008 because this is a story that really needs to be told. We are part of the World War II Valor in the Pacific National Monument. It was set up to show places of suffering on the home front during World War II. So Tule Lake somewhat fits into that story. There are 2 other relocation centers that the Park Service manages, Minidoka out in Idaho, and then Manzanar down 395 in California. And those are both their own separate National Historic Sites. So Tule Lake is a little interesting that it's connected with the Pearl Harbor sites and sites in Alaska. But we're happy that we were nominated.
Well, and it kind of makes sense because suffering in the Pacific, or we're being California, of course, so related there, and to have a different component of it, not from the soldier's perspective so much as from another component of our society, the citizens, who were suffering.
And being the largest one.
Yeah,
that would make sense.
System.
That would make sense that you're
really remarkable.
nominating.
So, how do people find out about you guys? What's the website, and and when are you really active? Like, when should we bring our kids for a tour?
So our website is www.nps.gov/TULE. You can find contact information on there. You can also call the Lava Beds Visitor Center any time of the year. That's 530-667-8113. Our most active time would be between Memorial Day and Labor Day. That's when we have the contact station at the Tule Lake Butte Valley Fairgrounds open, 8:30 to 5 every day of the summer. And that's where we run our tours out of. So that would be probably the best time to visit. We have a small contact station, some brochures, some information, and you'll be able to talk to a ranger there specifically about the Tule Lake site as well.
So a good summer trip to go and take your kids.
Cool. I bet it's a little cooler in Tule Lake.
I don't know if I would
theoretically.
But it's interesting to be there in times of extreme weather, because that's what people who are incarcerated there would have experienced. So it's part of the experience to see the hot temperatures, the cold temperatures while you're there as well.
And you don't get to go into any of the areas that the prisoners were stayed. Is that correct?
So
Besides the jail.
Yes.
Besides the jail.
Yeah. So there are no really any barracks or buildings
Okay.
left in that area. Most of them were actually cut in half after the war and given to homesteaders. And so you'll see them around the Tule Lake area. You'll see buildings that look kind of like half barracks,
Interesting.
but have been very restored.
Yeah.
People living out of them. There is a half of a barrack at the Tule Lake Butte Valley Fairgrounds, though, that you can look into and see how big those spaces were for whole
How they
families to be
lived.
living in.
Wow. Thank you so much for coming on. Obviously, we could talk about this for a long time. It's fascinating. So thank you very much, Amy. And Dawn was great earlier. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time on the forum.